Today we are learning about progressive web apps. And who is this guy on stage? Who's this crazy guy? Well, my name is Dean Hume. I'm an engineering manager at a company called Huddle. I'm also a Google developer expert, and I specialize in Google Chrome and web performance. So you're probably wondering, before we go any further, how many of you have actually heard the term lately? It's kind of around the web a bit, progressive web apps. If you just raise your hands, anyone? Okay, that's cool. Kind of helps me a little bit to know exactly where we're at. So simply put, a progressive web app uses modern web capabilities to deliver an app-like experience. Now, I've always been jealous of the great functionality that native app developers have, where they can, they can store, they can access things offline, all this cool functionality. And the web kind of felt like it was missing a lot of this. But this is where progressive web apps come in. And as we go through this talk, hopefully by the end of it, you'll have a good idea and a good picture of exactly what progressive web apps are. Now, there's a few core drivers behind the idea of progressive web apps. First of all, they should use URLs and links, so they're exactly like your normal websites you build every single day, especially if you develop for the web. They should also be able to access the system capabilities, things like Bluetooth, things like accessing the camera, all these sort of things. They should be easily accessible. You shouldn't have to go through Google Play Store or Apple App Store to get to it. You should just type in a URL and go to it, and that's a progressive web app. And finally, they should be free. Why should our users have to pay for this great benefit? And although that first quote kind of summed things up a little bit, I really like this quote, and this is by Alex Russell. He's from the Google team. And one of the things he said is, these apps aren't packaged or deployed through stores. They're just websites that took all the right vitamins. And the key there is all the right vitamins, and that's what I'm going to show you as we go through this talk. I think that they are just plain awesome, progressive web apps. There's no install needed. You don't have to wait for everything to download to access it. It's just a web page. There's no download needed. Again, you don't have to wait for it to come down. And it's built on the fabric of the web. So if you're a web developer and you understand how to use CSS, HTML, and JavaScript, all these things, you already know how to do these things. And believe it or not, you're already using them. I don't know if any of you use Inbox by Google. This is a progressive web app, and it's currently using a lot of the features that we're going to be talking about under the hood. But at the end of the day, what does this actually mean for our users? I mean, every time there's new technology that comes out, I love playing around with it. I love, firing it up and having a play. But it sometimes seems like it's so cutting edge. But believe it or not, this is actually beneficial to our users. It means that our websites can be more engaging, they can be faster, and also, very importantly, they can be more reliable. So bear with me for a second. I'm going to take you through this all. Tough crowd this morning. It's going to get worse, I'll tell you. So, what is this talk all about? Well, I've split it up into 4 sections. Hopefully it'll make it a lot clearer. We're going to understand exactly what web apps are and have a look at the basics. We're going to learn how to use progressive web apps to engage your users and this new functionality. We're going to also speed up your website. And finally, improve reliability. All of those key drivers behind it. So let's start straight into it and understand what progressive web apps really are. At the core of progressive web apps is this thing called a service worker. Again, I don't know how many of you have heard of these, but they are already here with us on the web, and they offer a lot of great functionality. Simply put, service workers are a background thread. They're just a JavaScript file that runs in the background and is able to access and intercept a lot of things. And this is another quote. Again, I'm using a bit of quoting, but I quite like the way this is described. So think of the web app requests, the requests that are going back and forth, the HTTP requests, as planes taking off. The service worker is the air traffic controller that routes these requests, or routes these requests if you're American. And with this power, anything that comes and goes from your site, you have total control over. So if you think about that for a second, imagine what we could do. They've also been described as the perfect progressive enhancement, because if your browser isn't a super new modern browser and it doesn't work, the users doesn't notice anything different. The functionality is exactly the same. But if it does work, they get all these added benefits. So it's really cool. So how does it work? Simply put, behind the scenes, On the left-hand side, we've got our browser, and we're hitting the server. We're making an HTTP request, and we're expecting a response. But with a service worker, they kind of sit in this layer in the middle. Remember that air traffic controller concept? HTTP requests are going through. We're hitting the server, and we can decide if at this point we want to do anything there. Maybe we don't. We just let it go through. And when things come back from the server, we can also decide, hey, maybe there's something we want to add to this response, or maybe there's something we want to tamper with. It kind of opens up a whole world of possibilities for fun and naughty things at the same time. You can even say, hey, because I've got the service worker here, maybe I don't even want to go to the server. I could just decide what to do with it at this point and return a response, never needing to go to the server. But with this whole fun, naughty, and nice idea is the idea that they're HTTPS only. That means that your web pages have to be served using a secure SSL certificate. And the reason for this is because imagine what could happen if this was in a malicious user's hands, if they could just go, every single request coming and going from your site, they could just intercept and tap into. They could do some pretty nasty things. So it needs to be served over HTTPS. And you're probably thinking, ugh, what a barrier to entry, this is such a pain. But actually, there's a load of free SSL options out there at the moment. I don't know if any of you use GitHub or GitHub Pages just to spin up sites. GitHub Pages already comes with a free HTTPS. It's not a custom domain, but it's still a good chance for you to play around with service workers. Cloudflare also offer a free option, and what they do is you simply sign up for it, and I think it's for one domain, and this works with custom domains. It kind of acts as a layer in front and gives you secure requests coming and going, which gives you a chance to play. I think there's a few other options out there at the moment, but I think Azure Websites also has it, HTTPS with a non-custom domain. But yeah, what does that mean? Hey, get to save some money, just play around, you know. Doesn't mean you have to go and spend a lot of money just to experiment with these things. Another thing worth mentioning is if you just want to develop locally and see what service workers are like, you also can just do it on your local HTTP local host, and it will work. It's meant to work like that for local development. So as I said earlier, service workers are the key to unlocking all the power. And the support is better than you think it is. Right now, Chrome, Firefox, and Opera all have live release support. Safari has hinted at it in their 5-year plans that they're going to start working on it, and Microsoft Edge is currently developing it right now as we speak. So this is great news. This is coming to the web, and it is already here. So when it comes to progressive web apps, progressive websites, however you want to call it, there's a few different approaches and a few mindsets that are out there at the moment. One of them is the concept of an app shell architecture or application shell architecture. And I'm going to explain what that is in a second. There's also another concept, and this is really how I started learning about them. And this is just picking and choosing the features that you like. Just because they're the perfect progressive enhancement, just bolt in whatever you feel that will be useful to your users. So let's have a look at the application shell architecture. In essence, the idea behind it is when a user first visits your website, you cache what you call the shell. Maybe it's the header, maybe it's the footer, but you don't cache the actual content that's inside. And the idea behind this is every time a user visits your site, they have something instantly. This is there for them to see immediately. Then you can go off and dynamically fetch the content and inject it in. So you're getting you're presenting the user with something immediately. It's almost like when you go to your Facebook app on your phone, you may instantly see the header appear, and maybe you don't have a connection, but you know you're in the Facebook app instead of just seeing an offline screen. This is one technique and one idea. It's quite cool. Probably don't want to go rewrite your whole app just to get it to work with this. But if you wanted to learn about it, and this is almost a talk in itself, this is a shortened URL. I recommend having a look at it. It's just bit.ly/app-shell. I'll leave that up for a sec. Or, if like me, you just kind of like tinkering and playing around, why not just pick and choose? Think of them as Lego blocks, just adding them onto your site. There's some great examples out there of what progressive web apps are currently capable of doing and how some people are using them. This URL at the top is just a GitHub site, github.io/pwa-list, and there's loads of options you can just click on and go through them and have a little bit of a play around. I realize as we go through this talk, there's going to be a lot of URLs and links that I'm going to share with you guys. What I will do is, straight after this talk, I will put it live and send it out, and you can just check the URLs out. So don't worry too much if you don't get them all as we're going. So let's just summarize what we've talked about. We've covered a lot of ground about understanding progressive web apps. We've talked about how service workers are the key to progressive web apps and unlocking these capabilities. We've talked about how they need to be SSL only because of security concerns, and also the architecture behind them, the ability to pick and choose, or maybe approaching it with the app shell architecture. So let's go deep and engage our users. I've broken this section down into 3 key parts: the look and feel of your site, and how you can get it to feel a bit more appy, the concept of push notifications on the web, and finally, adding to home screen. So right now, in your browser, especially if you're on a mobile device, you can actually, I don't know if you know this, but you can actually change the color of the bar at the top. You can change the look and feel and the way it appears. And you can, this isn't like anything fancy to do with progressive web apps, but it is a step towards the look and feel of your web app as such. If you add these tags into your web page, you can add a theme color. You can see it's got content in there. This is Safari, Windows Phone, Chrome, Firefox, and Opera. And that's a shortened URL just to tell you there exactly what's going on and the things you can add as of right now. You don't need to add anything fancy, and this isn't any service workery magic. But where we start to deviate and get into the deeper side of things, and this is where a manifest file comes in. Now, a manifest file is just a simple JSON file, and it sits in the root of your website. You could call it whatever you like. Generally, it's called manifest.json. But it's a simple file, and it controls how your app appears to your users. And it's also, it kind of lets the browser know what your app is all about. Ignore a lot of this on here. It kind of seems like a lot's being thrown at you at the moment. But I just wanted to show you exactly what it's all about. So, at the top, you can see background color. Now, that background color is important, because as we start to look at the functionality to add to home screen, you'll see where this background color comes into play. There's also the ability to look at icons and start URLs, but we're going to have a look at that in a sec. So to give you an idea, it kind of jumped ahead a bit quickly there. When that is clicked, so we've added this to the home screen, gives us the blue, and it goes straight into the app. I mean, this is a really simple example, just showing you. And this is Airhorner, which is on that PWA list that I showed you, Progressive Web App list. This shows you how you can start to get your websites to start to feel a lot more engaging to our users. And apart from that, we can now take this a step further. We've got a display. Do we want it standalone? And standalone, the idea behind that is you could even go so far as to hide the address bar, the URL. So it just shows it almost locked into the app style feel. There is icons. So the icon that you saw appear on the user's mobile screen, that is the icon of your choosing for your app. You've also got a start URL, because especially if there's no address bar, sometimes in that case, it'll go straight through. And then there's also orientation. So you might be developing games for the web, and you might want to choose landscape or portrait, and it will open by default in that mode. And like I mentioned, simply manifest.json file, and you add that tag in the head of your web page. And again, if the browser doesn't support it, nothing really happens. If your browser does support it, it will start to take on the functionality. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that, again, nice shortened URL, manifest.json. But if, like me, you're really bad at JSON files and you might miss a comma here and there or a semicolon, some clever person on GitHub created this app manifest generator. And all you have to do is you fill on the left-hand side, you fill in some of the details, the name, the URLs, the logo links, and it will generate this all for you and tell you exactly how you want to spit it out. Pretty cool stuff. But what about push notifications? We've kind of talked about the look and the feel, but the important stuff is how can we get our users to come back? How can we make our website sticky as possible? Right now, I don't know if any of you use, I'm sure all of you use Facebook, most of you use Facebook. If you've used it lately, you may have noticed on your browser, sometimes you get a push notification appearing in the bottom left-hand corner. Now, the cool thing about this is the user doesn't have to be on your website for it to appear. All they have to do is have its Chrome, Opera, or Safari, or Firefox open at the moment, and they will get this appearing. And it kind of, if new content appears, I know I quite often see this appear, and I click on the Facebook link, and I go through to Facebook, and I see the important information. It's a great way to start engaging your users, and people are really noticing the benefits of this. But there's 3 steps involved. So right now, if you navigate to a site that has this enabled, you'll be asked to subscribe. You don't want to just, kind of like a geolocation, it'll appear in the top left-hand corner and say, hey, would you like to subscribe to push notifications? And you say yes, allow. That gives the user the functionality. You get this little like user ID or GUID that you can start to use. And what you want to do is save this subscription. So you've got this user ID because we want to save it to send this person messages later on. Once we have that message, at any time we feel necessary, if there's an important event or we just want to say, hey, we've missed you, we've noticed you haven't come back, you can send them a push notification. Right now, you can do this using send from Google's Cloud. There's Google Cloud messaging, and it will ping a message across, and ta-da, you'll get this great message appear. There's also a few other suppliers at the moment. I think Roost is another one that'll do push notifications, and there's a few other polyfills at the moment. So I briefly showed you a flow diagram of how you could go about this. But let's just have a look at a little bit of code. So I'm not going to go too deep into this, but let's have a look at how this would look. So this is our web page. We're just including a little bit of JavaScript in the bottom of the page. Remember how earlier on I talked about the perfect progressive enhancement? Well, at the top of the page, we're saying, if this browser supports service workers, let's do something. Okay, cool, it does. So what we want to then do is say, okay, let's register our service worker. And it uses a thing, I don't know if you noticed the .then over there, that uses JavaScript promises. Is everyone aware of JavaScript promises? Do we know how they work? Yes, cool, all right. JavaScript promises, for those who don't know, is really just a clean way of doing callbacks. It can get pretty crazy as you start to look at callbacks in JavaScript. Once that's done, we now have this registration object, and we can start deciding what we want to do. Then we want to just say, hey, let's subscribe the user. That almost pops the notification to them saying, would you like to appear? We now have a subscription object which contains the user's ID so we can save it to the server. And that's really the part where we save the subscription. I've put in here a simple function, and I've called it send subscription to server. This could be whatever you wanted it to be. This, in my case, underneath the hood, I was literally just pushing this through using an AJAX request and sending through the subscription object. You can decide where you want this to go and how you want it to do that differently. And once you're done, you've now got this list of users who have subscribed on your website, and you're ready to send information to them. So you can send it from Google Cloud as one way. If you sign up on Google Cloud, I think you get, I can't remember the exact number, but you get a load of free messages that you can start to play around with this. It didn't take me very long. It took me a few hours to just get a solution up and running and pushing messages constantly. And that's it. But there's one more part. Remember the manifest file that I was talking about earlier? Well, this manifest file now needs to have this, what's called a GCM sender ID. And that sender ID is the Google Cloud messaging ID that we've signed up for. And that now notifies the browser. It was almost like a two-way connection. It says, hey, I'm going to send messages from the site, and the user is subscribed, so I can start pushing these messages. And that's all that's happening under the hood when you receive these Facebook notifications. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about this, there is 2 URLs. The first one is the official documentation that's up there running with Google, push-notification-Google. But I created a working example myself, which I think is a lot better if you want to check it out for yourself. Push notifications-Dean. And that has a full working example, talks you through the code and all the steps that I needed to go through. And if you want to, I don't know if any of you got laptops, don't look away from the screen, but if you wanted to, if you headed over to this URL, it will prompt you. This is a working example, and it has the code in the example that in the tutorial I talked about previously. It will actually prompt you and say, hey, would you like to subscribe to push notifications on this site? and it'll send and save the information. You can watch this all go through. Did you get that? Missed it. Okay, what about add to home screen? So we're engaging our users, we're sending them push notifications, but we want them to think of this, our website or our web app, as something they can keep on coming back to every single time. Why not give them the ability to add to the home screen? This is an example of the Chrome Dev Summit website. When you visit it, it will pop at the bottom and say add to home screen. It will then add this site to your home screen, and that'll start to appear. This is obviously on loop, and this is just showing it over and over again. One thing you may notice is this doesn't include, when they add to home screen, it doesn't include an icon of what the Chrome Dev Summit would look like. If you wanted to, you include your own icon, and it would appear on the screen as exactly as you choose. So it's really trying to engage our users as much as possible. And again, to do this revolves around service workers and a manifest file. This manifest.json file, there's a few steps that need to take place before it can automatically just start popping these messages. You need the manifest.json file. Your manifest needs a start URL, because remember, when you click on the add to home the icon that's on your home screen, it needs to know where it needs to go. You also need a 144 by 144 PNG icon, and this is so it knows what to save on your screen. Your site needs to be using service workers. And this is the key part. The user has to have visited your site at least twice within the last 5 minutes between visits. And the reason behind this is we don't want, and this is built natively into the browser, you don't want to all of a sudden just every time someone visits the site start pushing them, say, hey, add to home screen, add to home screen. That can be, it's like the new spam, right? We don't want to do that. And that really gives you an example of what this would look like. This is the same manifest file I was talking about earlier. It's got the logo, it's got the start URL, and it even decides on the orientation, which is the portrait. And it'll appear exactly like that. So let's summarize this section. We've engaged our users. We've talked about the look and feel of our site. We've talked about push notifications and add to home screen. So let's get into speed. And this is the part that I really like, performance. I love this. I'm going to, again, talk about 3 sections: caching and the power of service workers, the save data header, and background sync. Are we following? Are we still ready? Are we pumped for it's morning? Yes? Yes. Okay, caching. For the first time in a long time, and ever, we have the capability and the ability to programmatically decide how we want to cache resources that come back from the server, thanks to service workers. Previously, you'd get back caching headers from the server, just saying HTTP cache this for a certain amount of time. You didn't really have control over that. That was the server telling the browser. Now you have control over that. Using service workers, remember the simple diagram, going back to this example, we have something sitting in the middle. We can decide if we want to go to the server or not. Maybe we don't want to. So this is a simple example of how you can cache in just a few lines of code. I've created 2 variables at the top. This is in JavaScript. And I've got a cache version in there. And it's creating a little cache object called current cache. And you can see it's really just a string that's appending the cache version. Because every time you want to change your cache, you just bump the number, and that can change. There's different techniques you can use, but for this example, we'll go through this. We then want to say, before I go any further, one of the important parts of service workers is they're really event-driven. So you tap into these events. I really suck at JavaScript, and I was able to get up to speed with this really quickly, because all it is you just add event listers. You just say, I want to tap into the install event. I want to tap into the fetch event. And you can start manipulating as you please. The event listener, we want to listen out for the install. So we wait until our cache is open. And again, you can see we've got, can you see the red? Woo. We've got our promise come back telling us the cache is now open. You can decide what you want to do with it. We want to then just say, hey, let's add these results to the cache. We want to add our CSS, our modified CSS, and we want to add some JavaScript in there. In this example, I've only added 2 things. You could add whatever you liked in there. You can add as much, well, not whatever you like, hang on. You could add all the CSS, JavaScript, and HTML that you wanted. You could also on every request add to cache. You don't just have to do this on install. I'm doing this so I'm warming things up. But now, every time a fetch event comes through, we're tapping into this event. So this is really, again, you can see we've got event listener on the install event, and we've got an event listener on the fetch event. And now it's saying, okay, cool. Does this event that's coming through match anything in our cache? And if it does, just go straight to cache. Don't even bother going through to the network. But if it doesn't, just carry on as normal. So you can decide what pieces you want to cache and what you don't. That example used a lot of boilerplate code. You might find yourself rewriting a lot of this every single time you want to add some caching onto your site using service workers. And the clever team at Google have developed something called the Service Worker Toolbox. Now, the Service Worker Toolbox is really just a JavaScript file. It's a helper library. And what it does is it has a list of common caching strategies for the web. So instead of you having to write that code every single time, it gives you different options. You could say, I want the user to have cache only every time they visit the site. Or you may want to say, let's use cache network first, and if that fails, then let's fail over to cache. All of this is kind of, this logic is pre-written, pre-tested, and ready to roll for you to use. Just a few lines of code, you can get this up and running. The example at the bottom also talks you through this step by step and shows you exactly how you can get started. The GitHub one is also really good too. All right. The save data header. To tell you a bit of a story, I was recently in an airport in Spain, and I was trying to get, I can't remember, I'm not going to burn any airlines here, but I was trying to get to my airline details, and I had pretty sucky connection. I don't know why, something wasn't quite right. But it was taking me ages, and I couldn't board the flight because I needed to know the numbers and the details, and all I wanted was just plain text. I didn't need to see anything fancy. And often I think our websites are so bloated with extra things, and especially if you're a user in a country where you have to pay a lot for your data, that doesn't really seem fair, because we have great connection doesn't mean everyone else does. And this is where the save data comes in. Right now, if you use Android, you can actually enable this. If you're using Android for Chrome, you go under your settings and you can flick this little switch that says reduce data usage. And what it'll do, it will append this header, I don't know if you can see it just down there, to every request to the website. It just says save data on. And what this means is, as web developers, whether you're on the server side or not, you can decide how you want to respond with this information. You may say from the server, let's just not send back heavy information, let's rather send back light. Or you may decide using service workers. We don't even need to go to the server. Let's just find an alternative way. So, remember the example? I keep on going back to this. The example of service workers. We go through, we're the man in the middle. This is where the magic happens. We can say, what do we want to do with our request? How can we change it? Well, again, a little bit of code in my service worker. At the top of the page, you can see I'm tapping into the fetch event, and I'm saying, every time that happens, every request that's going through, let's just see what's going on. I want to then listen out. I can inspect every header on that request and say, does one of them contain the save data header? Okay, cool, it does. In that case, what I want to do is I want to find all the images. Are they JPEGs? Are they GIFs or GIFs, however you prefer? Are they PNGs? And with that URL, what do I want to do? So, for this example, and I've actually used this, I wouldn't necessarily recommend you do this on live, I simply changed the URL that this was expecting. So if it was dog.jpg, what's happening now is it's appending the words low-quality- plus dog.url. I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, but it is a way, and it does actually work. It doesn't mean you have to have 2 copies on your server, but if your user has this turned on, you can crank your settings right down, however your designers are doing it or however you're doing it, on your images, and you can send them back almost nothing. Or you could literally even decide at this stage, you could just respond and say no image and just send them back blank. So this is a bit of a shameless book plug, but I built this website, because I'm a web developer, for a book I wrote. And this hero image you see across the middle here, it is all shiny and big and sexy, and it looks, it's high res and it looks pretty good. But with the save data header turned off, because if people just wanted to get to this, or the save data header turned on, and people just want to get to this website, it looks a bit like that. Okay, you're probably thinking, well, that kind of sucks, right? That really sucks. But remember, who's this actually for? This is for users who don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time waiting for your site to download. It's just a way to do this. And all that was done was just using that simple code, that exact code that I showed you. I have to be honest, I did turn off fonts. So web fonts, I just decided just ignore those and just block that request. But believe it or not, I managed to save 900K for the save data header being on. The images really, really have low quality. You wouldn't have to go that low. It's up to you to decide how you want to do it. But it does give us power as developers to pass these benefits on to our users and make our sites even faster. All right, now background sync. I don't know if you see what I've done there. There's a sync in the background. Anybody? It's bad. So, back to service workers. If you're on a tab and you're trying to do some important information, and for some reason, while this is going through, or you start to do this action and your request fails, or you lose connection, or the user navigates away from a tab, you lose that. But with service workers, there's a thing called background sync. And it gives you the ability to try again as soon as the user syncs up. So they have this new functionality and you can go, cool, let's try again. This is pretty new right now, so this is a really simple example. But again, we're using JavaScript promises. We're just saying when our service worker is ready and we've got the registration, I just want to register something. I'm calling it my first sync in this case. We can then tap into this event. Remember, we're using event listeners. We're tapping into the sync event. This means as soon as we come back online and as soon as the connection's okay, let's push this through. And we can decide, do we want to wait until some expensive operation is complete? This could be Ajax. This could be something you're crunching behind the scenes. This will happen even if the user navigates away, which is cool stuff. And if you want to learn more about this, I recommend heading over to this. It's just bit.ly/background-sync. Okay, let's summarize what we've talked about. So this is the speed part. My favorite part, we talked about caching. We talked about the save data header and how you can make your images look really, really bad, but your website really fast. And also background sync. And our final part, we talk about how you make your websites more reliable. This is actually me this morning, getting jacked. Standard. And again, there's two parts I want to talk about. Offline browsing and third-party scripts. So I'm sure a lot of you travel to work every single day, either on a train or on a tube. For those of you who don't, you are very lucky. And your phone goes offline. You lose a connection. You may even be in an area where sometimes it says to me, hey, you have got a full 4G connection, but actually it doesn't. It's lying to me. I know it's lying, and I can see it, and it tells me I have 4 bars, but I can't navigate anywhere. That is so annoying. But why not make our websites offline? And this is where service workers really come into their own. So remember with service workers, again, I keep on going back to this example, but it explains things quite well. We don't need to go to the server, because if we have things in cache, we can just supply the information back to the user. Everything, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. We can tap into the fetch event. Again, we're adding an event listener at the top. Now we can say, because we're inspecting, we can inspect these headers and everything going through. Are we asking for an HTML page, and are we doing a GET request? What's happening? Are we navigating away? And if we are, let's decide how we want to respond. Again, this event.respond with, that's the thing we want to respond with. So we're saying, go off and fetch the URL that's coming through, and try catch an error. And if anything happens with this catch here, and there's an error that comes through, go get something from our cache. And in this case, I've just called it the offline page. When you put something into cache, you could give it a string or whatever you like, really. But this is how it matches. And because it's in our cache, and we don't have to go to the server every single time, we can spit this information out. Before we just have a look at these URLs, I'll leave these up for a sec. The Guardian, if you go to their, I think it's their developers blog or one part of their site, actually have this enabled at the moment. And if you are offline, it will give you a crossword, and you can play the crossword online. It's pretty cool stuff. And starting to think a bit outside the box with our traditional web apps. Instead of just presenting you with a, sorry, you're offline and you can't do anything, actually pushing back something useful to the users. There is 2 URLs here, offline-apps and offline-page. The bottom one is one that I wrote and just kind of talks you through it step by step and how to create an offline page. Or pages, you could go even further. All right, third-party scripts. If you develop for the web, I'm pretty sure most of you have third-party scripts in your sites already. You know, the things like the Facebook like button, the Twitter tweet buttons, maybe you're using Google Analytics for tracking or Mixpanel. All these sort of things are supplied by external companies, so third parties. And you don't have any control over what they send and bring back. They could change things completely, they could add extra information in. That is outside of your control. And what this means is that if something happens to their server, your site will suffer. And this is called a single point of failure. And I've actually experienced this. I was working at ASOS at the time, and something happened a few years ago, and something actually happened on the e-com site. Google went down, and the site wasn't displaying, and we were like, what's going wrong? We were all scrambling around like crazy to try and fix this. But actually, this was a Google site hanging, and we were using it, I think it was Google Analytics actually, and this was causing this to happen. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen, and it's not something that you want to just be, standing around waiting for this to happen. So if the server fails, something like this might happen, and I'm hoping that this is going to work on the network connection. So this is a video. It's just a simple video. There's not much going on. The video on the left is a web page loading. And on the right, I'm simulating a single point of failure, simulating a third-party site going down. This is what the user would see. This is a single point of failure for the exact same web page. Still waiting, still waiting, still waiting. By now, I'd probably have given up and moved away. But eventually, something does start to happen, and it times out. That is not ideal. But using service workers, we can fix this. If the server fails, we have control over how long these requests take and when we want to respond with anything. In the code above, this is a simple timeout function. It's starting to use the power of JavaScript promises. You see that it's returning a new promise. And it's a set timeout function. You may be familiar with this if you've ever written any JavaScript timeout functions. All it's saying is there's a delay, and you pass in the delay as how long you want it to delay for. And with service workers, you also have the ability to craft responses. Because remember, it gives us a lot of power with what we want to do. I'm saying respond with a new response type. So this is from the server. And give a 408 status and tell me some status text. That's probably not the ideal status, but you could send back whatever you wanted to. Now, we can tap into the fetch event. And the fetch event, we can use a pretty sneaky thing called a promise.race. And this is a race condition. And the idea behind this is it takes 2 functions, or 2 methods, however you want to say it, and it will actually, in our case, we're saying fire off the timeout. And I've said 6 seconds. You could do less, you could do more. This is really up to you. And at the same time, fire off the fetch. So it's going, get me this URL, and if it takes longer than a certain time, then respond with the response from the timeout. Or you could say, just carry on as normal, and it will respond appropriately. So you may not even have a single point of failure from somewhere else, but if something else outside of your control takes too long to respond, you can have this in there as a fail-safe. And this works. It's very, very cool. It's fun to play with. If you want to see this as a working example, bit.ly/sw-timeout, and you can see this. You can actually play with this. I think if you fire up your developer tools and you just add some throttling in there to really, really slow down the response, you'll get this to work. And that's it. I think we're doing pretty good for time, actually. Let's just summarize what we've talked about. We talked about 4 key areas: understanding what progressive web apps are and the basics. We talked about engaging your users. Some of the things we covered were push notifications. We also talked about how to speed up your website using the power of caching and how to improve reliability. But before we go anywhere, if you develop for the web, a lot of these things are fantastic features and they're new and it's like, yeah, let's get this in. It's important to remember that performance is still a feature. And when you're developing for your website, make sure that you're still doing the basics, like, minifying your JavaScript, minifying your CSS, serving over gzip. All these simple things can make a difference. This is a lot of further reading, and it feels like I'm throwing a lot at you. But what I'll do is, again, as I said, I'll share these slides so you can check them out. Something I recommend having a play with is this code lab. This is actually a code lab, and you build along with it, and it teaches you from start to finish how to build your first progressive web app, and it shows you caching, it shows you everything that's involved. Very, very useful. There's also these recipes. Mozilla and Chrome have one. You can head over and just see the different examples, and they show you just tiny snippets of code about how powerful they are. And these, some of them show you offline, some of them show you some of this promise race examples. But what's still to come? We've covered a lot of very cool features, but there's a lot that's still to actually come for service workers and progressive web apps. Web Bluetooth is on the way. And this gives you the ability to access Bluetooth devices from the web. Streams, so being able to stream information from the server. One of the examples I saw, this was actually Jake Archibald's, showed where he was searching for results, but instead of waiting for the entire search results to come back and sending back a giant chunk, sending them in streams. And the page appears a lot quicker to the user, and it's a lot more fluid. There's also Web NFC, which is near-field communication, so being able to tap against something from your phone, and this is now on the web, which is great. And also geofencing. I'm really excited about this one. So geofencing is this idea that if a user is in a certain location, you can start to bucket them, maybe, and this gives you a world of possibilities. You could send them different content, decide exactly, you could even, I don't even know, but there's just loads of cool things you could do. The users will get bucketed according to their geofencing, and you have control over this. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the talk. I tweet about this sort of stuff and web performance-y things, so follow me if you're ever interested in it, and ask me some questions. Do we have time for, I think we got time for questions. I think we're good. Go for it, fire away. I'll do my best. So Apple have been pretty quiet about this tech. They have signaled that they're interested in it in a 5-year plan for getting this involved. So we're hoping. All of the other browser vendors have accepted it and starting to work on it. So fingers crossed. Yeah, it depends how you look at it, right? But yeah, I hope it starts to appear sooner. It would be great to see it. I think it will. We're getting there. Anyone else? Sure.
For the push notification, you said there was a user ID. How is this ID created? Is it based on authentication as well?
No, it's just like a random GUID that just gets created.
If you're logged out, someone else is in the computer that would get notification for you.
Yes, it's just based on the user in that session. It's not got anything to do with authentication. So yeah. Yes, you see it on your mobile device, and you'll see it appear on the, I think it's bottom right-hand corner of your screen. But just to go back to your question, I think the idea behind that is even though you might see the message and you click on the notification, it's your job as the app to send someone to like a page and ask them to authenticate again. How much information you display on that notification is up to you. But yeah. Sorry.
Can you decide how to render the notification as well, or it's just text?
No, it's an icon and a piece of text that appears on it. It's not really up, it's kind of in the browser's hands. Yeah. Sorry, yeah, go for it. Yes, it will work, yeah. You can actually do that right now. Even though the add to home screen, a pop-up appears at the bottom, You can manually go do it. I think you just go into settings in Chrome and it says add to home screen and you will notice that appear. And when you click on that button, even on iOS, it works on my iPhone. You click on it, it will decide how it wants to display. So portrait, landscape. Yeah. Go for it. So when it comes to the caching, so the question that, for those who didn't hear is just really about controlling the caching. Controlling it is, so there's the coding side, there's the programmatic side. You can also clear the cache. I know you can clear it in the dev tools. I'm not exactly sure when. I think when you clear the cache completely, it will do the same for all your sites. It doesn't really give you control over how much. It differs from device to device, so you might only be allowed a certain amount per device. But it's kind of like a first in, last out idea where it pops it in, and then if it'll just pop it off the queue. Yeah, I mean, I really like it as opposed to just, you could just decide exactly what you want to cache as opposed to just being sent back a ton from the server. So, yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you very much. I'll kind of be hanging around all day, so if you see me and you want to ask me any of this sort of stuff, just come on over. Thanks, everybody.